You know that feeling when the entire country seems to be holding its breath, but you're the only one who can still breathe normally? It's a specific Sunday in February. Around 6:30 p.m., something surreal happens to the American landscape. The interstates, usually a pulsating vein of restless commuters, go quiet. The suburban streets, typically alive with the sound of lawnmowers or kids playing, fall into an eerie, church-like stillness. But inside the houses, there's a collective roar. Millions of people are leaning toward their screens, their nervous systems literally tethered to a ball moving across a field. And then, there's you. Maybe you're in your backyard, noticing how the winter air smells like wood smoke and damp earth. Maybe you're at a local park, realized you're the only soul on the trail. If you're the person who feels absolutely nothing when a touchdown is scored, you've probably spent years feeling like an alien in your own culture. But here's the thing, you aren't missing out. You're actually part of a fascinating shadow population that has cracked a code most people don't even know exists. Not caring about the big game isn't a personality flaw. It's a psychological superpower. To understand this, we have to look at the Costco Cathedral Effect. It's one of the greatest hidden perks of being an outlier. Imagine walking through those giant sliding doors on a typical Sunday afternoon. Usually, it's a battlefield. You're dodging oversized carts, navigating the slow walkers in the snack aisle, and bracing for a 30-minute gauntlet at the checkout. But on this Sunday, the warehouse transforms into a playground of silence. You can actually hear the hum of the massive industrial refrigerators from 3 aisles away. You can spend 10 minutes contemplating the different types of olive oil without a single person bumping into your shoulder. It's a high-definition experience of a world without the background noise of forced hype. When you lock eyes with another shopper in that deserted aisle, there's no need for words. There's just a slight, knowing nod. It's a silent recognition that while 115 million people are spending their emotional currency on a screen, you are experiencing the rare luxury of space and time. You're the one who realized that the world doesn't stop just because a game starts. In fact, for you, the world finally begins to make sense. Why is your brain wired this way? It often comes down to a concept called optimal arousal theory. See, every individual has a unique sweet spot for external stimulation. For a die-hard fan, the screaming crowds, the flashing lights of the halftime show, and the high-stakes drama are exactly what their brain needs to reach that peak state. But for someone in the shadow population, that same level of noise is often perceived as a sensory assault. You might be what psychologists call a highly sensitive person. Your nervous system is like a high-end microphone that picks up every frequency. For you, the Super Bowl isn't an escape, it's an overstimulation machine. You don't need the $7 million commercials to tell you what to feel, because your internal world is already rich and vivid. You find your optimal arousal in the steady, rhythmic focus of a personal project. Maybe it's the smell of sawdust in your garage as you sand a piece of walnut wood, or the complex, layered logic of a book on experimental archaeology. Your brain isn't broken or boring. It's just tuned to a frequency that values depth over volume. This brings us to the internal locus of control. This is a fancy way of saying that you prefer to be the driver of your own satisfaction rather than a passenger in someone else's. Think about the psychology of berging or basking in reflected glory. This is what happens when a fan says, "We won," even though they were sitting on a recliner 300 miles away from the stadium. Their brain gives them a dopamine hit as if they personally achieved something. But, for the pragmatic doer, this logic just doesn't compute. You don't want a borrowed victory, you want an earned one. You'd rather spend your Sunday evening finishing a DIY repair, mastering a difficult recipe, or finally organizing that messy home office. When you look at the final product of your work, the satisfaction you feel is real, tangible, and entirely yours. You aren't interested in the voluntary anxiety of watching a game where you have zero influence over the outcome. You're interested in the power of your own hands and your own mind. Have you ever noticed that the people who are most immune to the hype are often the ones who are the most deeply engaged with the actual work of their own lives. There's a historical layer to this as well that most people miss: the concept of bread and circuses. Centuries ago, the Romans realized that if you keep the population fed and entertained, they'll stop paying attention to the things that actually matter. The intellectual skeptics in our shadow population are often the ones who can see the modern version of this machine in high definition. You see the massive corporate sponsorship, the engineered drama, and the tribal us versus them narratives, and you feel a sense of hype immunity. You recognize that modern sports have evolved from ancient war games, a way for rival tribes to compete without the actual bloodshed. While this tribalism provides a sense of belonging for many, for you, it feels like a sanitized, manufactured distraction. You'd rather spend your attention on something intellectually honest. You're the one watching a documentary on the geology of the Grand Canyon or reading about the evolution of social structures. You aren't trying to be edgy or superior. You're just protective of your mental real estate. You've realized that attention is your most valuable resource, and you refuse to let it be hijacked by a multi-billion-dollar circus. We also have to talk about the Monday morning mirage. There's a specific social tax you pay at the office water cooler after a big event. It's that awkward moment when someone asks, "Did you see that catch?" And you have to say, "No, I missed it." In that moment, you're briefly labeled as the outlier, the one who's out of the loop. But look at the psychology of that interaction. While your co-workers are spending their morning debriefing a fleeting moment of excitement that has already evaporated, you're still carrying the steady, sustainable glow of a well-spent Sunday. You didn't wake up with a sports hangover or the lingering stress of a loss. You woke up with the peace of mind that comes from a long walk in a silent park or a deep connection with your family. You've traded the social currency of a shared event for the emotional currency of a life lived on your own terms. You're perfectly okay with being the outlier because you've realized that the loop everyone is in is often just a circle that leads nowhere. There is a profound, quiet dignity in what society likes to call a boring lifestyle. In a culture that demands we always be part of the next big thing, choosing to spend a Sunday evening playing with your dog, having a long dinner with your parents, or simply sitting in a quiet room is an act of quiet rebellion. This is high-definition living in its purest form. It's about being present for the small, non-televised moments that actually make up a human life. You've realized that while 115 million people are watching a game that will be forgotten by next season, the bonds you build and the peace you cultivate have no expiration date. You aren't missing the game. You're winning at the long game. You've learned that the most important stats aren't touchdowns or yardage, but the number of hours spent in deep, uninterrupted flow with the things and people you actually love. You're the proof that you don't need a stadium roar to feel alive. Sometimes, all you need is the sound of your own breath in a quiet room. The meaningful truth at the heart of the shadow population is that independence isn't about being a hermit or hating what other people love. It's about the courage to set your own internal clock in a world that is constantly trying to set the time for you. It's about recognizing that you don't have to participate in every national moment to be a whole, connected person. When the game ends and the stadium lights finally dim, as the millions of TVs across the country are clicked off, everyone goes back to the same reality. But you never left it. You've been here the whole time, grounded and present. You've learned that the most important victory isn't the one that happens on a field under stadium lights. It's the one that happens inside your own mind when you decide that your peace is worth more than the hype. So, the next time the world seems to go quiet on a Sunday afternoon, take a breath, notice the stillness, realize that you aren't lost. You're exactly where you want to be. And in a world of constant noise, that clarity is the ultimate win.